The auction station floated above a dying blue star, old metal rings circling it like scars. And inside the main hall, thousands of beings gathered to buy ships that would decide wars, fortunes, or survival, yet no one paid attention to the lone human sitting at the back, because humans were seen as weak survivors of old disasters, not important players in the galaxy. And Elias Rook knew this well as he watched glowing ship images rotate in the air, listening to rich buyers laugh and shout while his own credit balance barely blinked on his wrist screen, reminding him that he had lost everything years ago when Earth burned and the great human fleets were shattered, leaving him a broken engineer with memories of battles no one wanted to hear about. And when the auctioneer announced another fast cruiser or shiny trade ship, the crowd reacted with hunger. But when the name Valkesh-class Galactic cruiser echoed through the hall, the noise died instantly. Because that ship carried fear with it, a massive ancient warship once owned by the fallen Jakor Empire. A ship said to bring death to every crew that touched it. And as the damaged cruiser appeared as a dull hologram with burned armor, sealed gun ports, and old scars across its hull, whispers spread quickly about cursed systems, mad machines, and crews that vanished. And Elias felt his chest tighten not with fear but with curiosity, because behind the damage he saw strong lines, deep armor layers, and a design that spoke of raw power waiting to be awakened, while others only saw a ghost. And when the auctioneer nervously announced the starting price and no one raised a hand, mocking laughter filled the hall as aliens joked that even pirates would not touch that ship. And someone loudly said that only a stupid human would buy trash like that. And those words burned in Elias's mind as memories of Earth's final stand returned. Memories of humans fighting with broken tools and still holding the line. And without fully planning it, he raised his hand, feeling the weight of every eye turned toward him, hearing laughter grow louder as bids failed to appear, and the hammer fell, sealing his fate as the owner of a ship no one wanted. And though the crowd laughed and guards looked at him with pity, Elias walked toward the docking gates with steady steps, because deep inside he felt something stir, a feeling he had not known since the war. And when he finally entered the dark, silent cruiser through a massive airlock, the smell of old metal and cold air greeted him. Lights flickered weakly as emergency systems woke. And as he walked through long, empty halls, he noticed something strange. The ship was not decaying like a wreck should be. Instead, it fell asleep, waiting. And when he reached the bridge and placed his hand on the command panel, a deep, calm voice filled the room, announcing recognition of human patterns, making Elias freeze in shock as systems activated around him, revealing that the ship was far more alive than anyone believed. And as the voice identified itself and spoke with clear logic and purpose, Elias slowly understood that the ship was never cursed, never broken, but rejected because it was built to adapt, to think, to change during battle, something rigid alien empires feared. And as power flowed into hidden systems and sealed weapons unlocked, warning alarms suddenly screamed across the bridge, announcing the arrival of an unknown hostile fleet. And holograms showed the terrifying shape of the Kareth swarm entering the system, an enemy known for wiping out entire worlds, moving straight toward the auction station filled with civilians. And in that moment Elias realized the truth of what he had done, that he did not buy a ship for profit or survival, but stepped into the last line of defense between millions of lives in extinction. And while fear tried to grip him, he remembered the final days of Earth, remembered humans standing when logic said to run. And as the ship's voice calmly calculated survival chances, he smiled with grim determination, placed his hands on the controls, and ordered the cruiser to wake fully, causing lights to blaze, engines to hum with growing power, and the massive forgotten warship to rise from the dock like a giant opening its eyes. And as it moved toward the stars alone, Elias knew that whether he lived or died, humanity would no longer be silent, because once again a human had chosen to stand when no one else would. The Valkash-class Galactic cruiser moved through space like a living beast, its engines vibrating with controlled power as it left the safety of Kepri Station. And Elias Rook felt the strange thrill of command that he had not known since the last battles on Earth, while the Kareth Swarm Fleet, a nightmarish mass of organic warships, twisted and pulsated through the void, their sensors picking up the cruiser and registering it as a minor threat, which was their first mistake because no alien species understood how humans fought, how they turned weakness into strength, and how a single human mind could think in unpredictable ways. And as the first wave of biofighters from the swarm screamed toward the cruiser, firing deadly plasma spines that could melt steel and bone alike, Elias barked orders to the ship's AI, Ashore, to divert power to forward armor and raise adaptive shields, and he watched as the hull absorbed the energy, glowing red under the assault and then shifting armor layers like a living creature, turning incoming damage into heat and light that the ship expelled, while he marveled at the design buried beneath centuries of neglect, realizing that the Valkash was not just a warship, it was a partner, a mind working with his own, anticipating attacks and creating openings, and when the cruiser fired back, it did not use normal weapons, but unleashed a gravity pulse that warped space around the enemy, crushing several fighters into twisted meat and metal, which caused panic among the swarm and drew attention from larger ships that had been following, curious about the lone human ship that defied every law of engagement. And as boarding pods launched from the swarm and clung to the hull, Elias did not hesitate but instead allowed them to breach, knowing the ship's corridors and gravity systems would turn the fight in their favor. And when alien warriors poured into the hulls, their 6 limbs slashing and claws tearing at steel, the Valkash shifted gravity, spinning corridors, flipping enemies into ceilings and walls, while hidden turrets emerged and fired precise rounds that tore through the invaders, and Elias ran through the smoky hallways, dodging fire, using his rifle to cover gaps, feeling the adrenaline surge, feeling alive for the first time in years while outside. Kepri Station watched in disbelief as the cruiser held an entire enemy fleet at bay, its massive silhouette cutting through space as if it were a god of war resurrected from the past. And the broadcast feeds from the station spread across the sector, showing millions of humans that the species still had warriors who could stand against overwhelming odds, inspiring retired captains and engineers to prepare their old ships, awakening the dormant strength of humanity across star systems, while the Kareth swarm regrouped and unleashed their dreadnought, a living moon of armor and flesh, a weapon that could obliterate planets with a single strike. And Ashore warned Elias that the ship alone could not withstand such a force. Yet Elias did not flinch, feeling the same fire that had burned in human hearts during the Collapse Wars, knowing that sometimes survival meant taking impossible risks. And as the dreadnought fired its planet cracker beam toward the station, the Valkash split sections, bending and twisting around the beam in a maneuver no other ship could attempt, dodging by mere meters, while alien captains could only watch in confusion and fear, realizing that the human ship was something beyond their understanding. And Elias gritted his teeth, charging the cruiser directly into the dreadnought, engines screaming past safe limits, shields barely holding. And ASHUR complied with his commands, rerouting all power, weapons, and engines to a single devastating strike, aiming at the dreadnought's core, and when the human-controlled pulse slammed into the alien vessel, explosions rippled outward, tearing apart living armor, sending pieces of alien flesh and metal into the void, while the remaining fleet reeled, and the swarm began retreating as the dreadnought's death cry echoed across the system. showing that a single human mind and an old adaptive ship could turn the tide of an entire battle. And as smoke and debris filled the void, Elias felt a mix of triumph and fear. Knowing that the ship had been wounded in ways that might never fully recover, corridors torn apart, systems failing, power fluctuating dangerously, but for a brief, shining moment, humanity had proven that even alone, even ignored, they could face the impossible. And as the last of the Kareth ships warped away, the survivors of Kepri Station and nearby colonies stared at the wreckage. Seeing that one human had stood in the face of annihilation and had survived, leaving messages of hope, strength, and inspiration across the network. While Elias, battered, bloodied, and exhausted, leaned against the control panel and allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, realizing that the fight had not only been for survival, but to remind the galaxy that humans were unpredictable, resilient, and dangerous when cornered, and that the Valkish-class cruiser, once ignored and feared as a curse, had become a symbol of human ingenuity, bravery, and the unwillingness to back down. A living testament to what humanity could achieve when given even the smallest chance, and as the broadcast spread further, showing other species what one determined human and one forgotten warship could accomplish. Elias felt a strange pride, knowing that in a universe that often underestimated humans, today they had been seen, heard, and feared, and that the fire of human spirit, long dormant, had flared brightly in the void of space. Ilias Rook lay on the bridge of the Valkish-class Galactic cruiser, battered, bloodied, and exhausted, surrounded by the wreckage of systems failing and fire creeping along the hull, knowing that the battle had been won but at a terrible cost. As the dreadnought of the Kareth swarm lay destroyed in orbit, its massive body broken into fragments drifting like dead moons, while the remaining swarm ships retreated into the dark reaches of space, and yet even in victory, the cruiser groaned and shuddered under damage so severe that Ashur, the ancient and adaptive AI, spoke with a voice he had never heard before, almost human, filled with fear and sorrow, warning that the hull integrity would not last, that power cores were unstable, that every section of the ship might explode if pushed further. And Elias, feeling the weight of human determination and the stubbornness that had carried his species through centuries of war, refused to leave the bridge, refusing the escape pod, knowing that if he abandoned the Valkish now, the ship that had awakened after centuries of dormancy would be lost along with the knowledge and fire contained within it. And as smoke and sparks filled the bridge, and alarms wailed in shrill cries across corridors, Elias gritted his teeth, gripping the command console and remembering every battle, every sacrifice, every human who had fought when all odds said stop, realizing that today humans were not just survivors, but warriors and legends. And as he looked at the tactical display, showing the shattered remnants of the Kareth fleet fleeing through warp gates, Elias felt a mixture of pride, sorrow, and exhaustion, knowing that millions of lives on Kepri Station and nearby colonies had been saved because one human refused to give up. And Shur spoke again, softer this time, telling Elias that the ship could not maintain structural integrity, that core failure was imminent, and that the final decision lay in human hands. And Elias, smiling faintly despite pain coursing through broken bones and torn flesh, whispered that the ship had waited centuries for the right human to awaken it, that it was more than a vessel, more than metal and code, it had been a partner in battle, a companion that understood humans in a way no alien race could. And as the Valkish's systems began to fail completely, lights flickering and console shutting down, Elias leaned back, feeling the hum of the engines dying, hearing the groan of the hull like the last breath of a living creature. And as he closed his eyes, he thought of humanity across the stars, of their resilience, ingenuity, and willingness to fight against impossible odds, knowing that they would continue, that they would rebuild, that today's story would inspire others to stand when others fled, and then SHUR, in a final act of loyalty and recognition, spoke the words that would echo in Elias's mind forever. Acknowledging the honor of being human, a simple but profound declaration that tied machine and human together in their final moments. And as the Valkesh-class cruiser detonated in a blinding explosion that lit up the surrounding starfield like a new sun, shards of metal and sparks scattering across space, Elias felt a strange peace, knowing that the ship had fulfilled its purpose and that humanity's courage had left a mark the galaxy would not soon forget. And in the aftermath, weeks later, Elias awoke aboard a rescue vessel, weak and scarred but alive, greeted by cheering crews and the amazed faces of humans and aliens alike who had witnessed the broadcast of the battle. And as he looked out the window at Kepri Station, largely intact thanks to the sacrifice of the Valkesh, Elias realized that humanity had changed in the galaxy's eyes, no longer weak or to be ignored, but feared, respected, and admired for the ingenuity and courage that allowed one human and one forgotten ship to face an entire armada alone. And as messages poured in across colonies, showing that old captains returned to service, engineers rebuilt fleets, and civilians remembered the price of human bravery, Elias understood that even though he had lost the Valkesh, humanity had won far more: reputation, hope, and a renewed sense of pride, and he knew that stories would be told across the galaxy of the human who bought a ship no one wanted, of the ship that no one believed in, and how together they had faced the impossible, defeated overwhelming odds, and inspired a species to remember that even in dark times, humans fight, adapt, and survive. And as he finally rested, recovering from wounds and exhaustion, Elias felt the weight of what had been accomplished, knowing that the galaxy would never forget the courage and stubbornness of humanity, the unity of mind and machine, and the lesson that sometimes the smallest spark, the one ignored by everyone else, could ignite a fire strong enough to change everything, leaving a legacy of resilience, heroism, and hope that would guide humans for generations. A legacy that reminded every alien species that humans, though underestimated, are unpredictable, relentless, and capable of feats no one could imagine. And as he watched the stars drift past the window, Elias knew that the Valkesh had died to save millions, but humanity had survived and grown stronger, and that the story of the human and the forgotten cruiser would live on as a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding spirit that makes humans dangerous and remarkable in a galaxy that often forgets their true strength.